TV7 Israel News is made possible thanks to your generous donations.
Shalom, Erev Tov, good evening. This is TV7 Israel News, broadcast to you from Jerusalem. The Islamist Hamas violated the ceasefire by killing an IDF soldier, drawing IDF retaliatory fire. U.S. President Donald Trump voices his keen aspiration to transition into Phase 2 of his 21-point plan for the Gaza Strip. Syria, under the new interim government of Ahmad al-Sharaa, is proactively working to reinvigorate relations with Russia. Despite the Islamist Hamas's repeated violations of U.S. President Donald Trump's 21-point plan, the ceasefire continues to hold for the time being. During yesterday's afternoon hours, a group of Islamist Hamas terror operatives perpetrated a combined anti-tank missile and sniper fire attack against IDF troops operating within the ceasefire's defined yellow line, killing one IDF soldier who was operating a military excavator. The IDF said its forces returned fire. Nevertheless, the terror operatives reportedly managed to flee the scene. The IDF announced subsequently that First Sergeant in Reserve Ephraim Yonah Feldbaum, aged 37, was the soldier who was killed in the deadly incident, which took place in the southern town of Rafah. He is survived by his wife and 5 children. May the Lord grant them comfort and may his memory be blessed. Meanwhile, in response to Hamas's blatant and deadly violations of the ceasefire agreement, the IDF, in close cooperation with the ISA, or Shin Bet, conducted precision strikes against dozens of terror targets belonging to the Islamist terror group in the Gaza Strip. The targets struck included key terrorists, observation posts, weapons production warehouses, launched posts, underground tunnels, and mortar shell firing posts. In addition, the IDF also conducted 21 targeted eliminations of Hamas's field commanders. Meanwhile, aboard Air Force One,
Sir, could we get your reaction to Israel striking in Gaza again?
Well, as I understand it, they took out an Israeli soldier. I just heard about it a little while ago. They killed an Israeli soldier, so the Israelis hit back, and they should hit back. When that happens, they should hit back.
So do you think does that worry you about the ceasefire? Does that jeopardize the ceasefire in any way?
No, nothing's going to jeopardize. You have to understand, Hamas is a very small part of peace in the Middle East, and they have to behave. They're on the rough side, but they said they would be good, and if they're good, they're going to be happy, and if they're not good, they're going to be terminated. Their lives will be terminated, and they understand that. And we have many countries that are willing to do that.
the American leader, in response to another question on the disarmament of Hamas, continued by noting that his team was looking into it since they are keen on entering into Phase 2 of President Trump's 21-point plan.
Yeah, we're looking at that right now. That's starting because we're getting into Phase 2, and that's starting. You have to understand, Hamas is a very small part of the overall Middle East peace. We have peace in the Middle East. If we have to, we'll take out Hamas very easily, and that'll be the end of Hamas. We would rather not. We made a deal with them where they were going to behave, and they have to behave. If they don't behave, they get taken out. And it could be from numerous countries. It could be from Israel, but it could also be from other countries. Numerous countries have already called me that are parties to the deal and said, we'd love to do it if you want us to do it. And these are powerful countries. These are not countries to be toyed with.
It is important to know that while President Donald Trump is seemingly keen on progressing into Phase 2 of his 21-point plan, the Islamist Hamas continues to drag its feet vis-a-vis its obligations under Phase 1, which includes a 16 days delay and clear violation at that, in returning all of the hostages, both the living and diseased.
I was hoping to stand up here today and tell you we received the remains of one or all of our 13 murdered hostages last night who would have been identified by now, but instead I stand here to tell you something different that completely explains the story of who Hamas is, a barbaric group of Islamic jihadists that value nothing but cruelty against Israel and its own people.
It is important to stress that Israel is unequivocally convinced with corroborated intelligence that the Islamist terror group Hamas knows full well where all of the hostages are located. Moreover, Hamas was caught in its lie when its terror operatives were seen placing the remains of one of the hostages into the earth before unearthing it prior to handing it over to the Red Cross.
The IDF caught the entire sequence of events on a military drone, an act that is deliberate and is a disgraceful deception that is just one of many lies Hamas has been propagating since the beginning of the war. Israel has not only waited patiently during this time, but gave Hamas an opportunity to retrieve and hand over all of our 28 deceased hostages in captivity. We are fully aware and have knowledge that Hamas can locate and retrieve the remains of our 13 deceased hostages that are still in Gaza right now. The deception by Hamas we see today is nothing new. We've been trying to warn the world and the press about it since the beginning of this war. Lie after lie, the media has fallen into their trap. The same trap they created when spreading misinformation about severe starvation inside of Gaza for 2 years. I can share with you today that Israel continues to facilitate the entry of thousands of trucks carrying humanitarian aid and food into the Gaza Strip each week, with hundreds of trucks entering on a daily basis.
Turning to Moscow, where Russian Defense Minister Andrei Belousov hosted his Damascus counterpart Murhaf Abu Qasra, also known by his nom de guerre, Abu Hassan 600 or Abu Hassan al-Hamawi, when he played key roles in serving as a field commander in both al-Qaeda as well as Hayat Tahrir al-Sham. During the course of their meeting, the two top defense officials discussed deepening cooperation between Russia and Syria. It is important to know that while Moscow and Damascus under the new regime were formerly bitter rivals of one another, during a recent trip, however, the new de facto ruler of Damascus to Moscow, Ahmad al-Sharaa, as well as President Vladimir Putin, voiced their joint interest to deepen their bilateral ties, to include the new Damascus regime's acknowledgement of all past agreements between Russia and Syria.
Я вам благодарен за то, что вы приняли нашу делегацию межведомственную во главе.
I am thankful to you for welcoming our delegation from various departments that was headed by Deputy Prime Minister Novak. Many interesting and useful initiatives were voiced. From our side, we are ready to do everything to implement them, as well as regular contacts and agreements via foreign ministries. We are very glad to see you.
Мы очень рады вас видеть.
There are historical ties, and there are also bilateral relations and common interests that connect us. Many things connect us. Much of Syria's food supply relies on Russian production, and numerous power stations depend on Russian expertise. Many strategic and political relations, both regional and international, are closely linked to Russia. We respect all past agreements and this rich history, and we are working to redefine the nature of these relations.
The new regime in Damascus is very keen on reinvigorating its ties with Moscow, primarily due to its heavy reliance on wheat from Russia at a time when Syria experiences drought at biblical proportions, which, according to the U.S. Department of Agriculture, forces the war-ridden country to import over 2.15 million tons of wheat for the remainder period of 2025 as well as 2026. Therefore, the largest exporter of wheat globally, namely Russia, is regarded by the new Damascus regime as a vital partner, irrespective of inevitable so-called strings attached that go counter to the geostrategic interests of its patrons. However, in contrast to support granted to Damascus by both Washington and Moscow at international fora, Beijing, who does not view the new rules of Damascus in the same light because of the close ties which the Islamist leadership maintains with the internationally designated terrorist organization, the East Turkestan Islamic Movement.
叙利亚过渡政府曾多次表示
The Syrian transitional government has repeatedly stated that Syria will not pose a threat to any country. We urge the transitional government to honor this commitment, earnestly fulfill its counterterrorism obligations, and take firm and effective measures to combat all terrorist organizations listed by the Security Council, including the East Turkestan Islamic Movement, in order to earn the trust of the international community through concrete actions.
以实际行动取信于国际社会。
It is worth noting that on November 5th of 2020, the then U.S. Secretary of State Mike Pompeo announced the removal of the East Turkestan Islamic Movement from Washington's list of foreign terrorist organizations, citing no credible evidence that the Islamist terror group, which holds ties to al-Qaeda, continued to exist as an organization for over a decade prior. Nevertheless, since the Turkish-backed offensive of separate Islamist and jihadist groups against Damascus that ultimately brought about the fall of the Assad regime on December 8th, it became abundantly clear that the East Turkestan Islamic Movement constituted a pivotal role in the offensive and was subsequently also responsible for a number of massacres, to include against the Alawite minority on the west coast of Syria on March 6th earlier this year. Since then, the jihadi terror group supposedly integrated into the new armed forces of Syria under the recommendation of Turkey and blessing of President Donald Trump's Syria envoy, Ambassador Tom Barrack. Thank you for watching TV7 Israel News. I would like to thank you if you are a supporter of TV7 Israel, since your donation is helping us produce our daily news updates from here in Jerusalem. If you haven't yet supported TV7 Israel, please consider doing so. You can donate via our website at www.tv7israelnews.com. I will also like to know that TV7 Israel is, of course, exclusively donation-based. Now, separately, as ever, pray for our brothers and sisters facing persecution globally, along with prayers for the peace of Jerusalem and salvation of Israel. I'm Jonathan Hassan wishing you an Erev Mevorach, and God willing, until our next update, Shalom from Jerusalem.